Hi everybody, my name's Kevin Barrow. I'm the new CEO of the Butterfly Foundation. Thought I'd spend a little bit of time today maybe talking about some of the things that make me me and some of the reasons why I joined the Butterfly Foundation, so perhaps you can get to know me just a little bit. So I grew up in Auckland in New Zealand, so I went to high school there, and then after graduating high school, luckily enough, I went down to Hamilton and went to Waikato University, and there I did a couple of degrees in science, and from that point in time I got moved back to Auckland with the company I joined, and then across to Sydney. And in Sydney I met my wife and have a couple of kids, and so I've been in Sydney, Australia ever since. So I've worked my whole life in the healthcare sector, and it's always been fantastic to know that the work that I was doing and that the companies I worked for were doing were improving patient outcomes in Australia. I think the difference though in joining Butterfly is perhaps best summed up by the first meeting I had here. And that was with a mother and father who had very sadly lost their adult daughter to an eating disorder. And they came to us at Butterfly wanting to make a donation of a sum of money. And as they handed us that money, I realised the tremendous responsibility that we have and the tremendous faith they put in us to make sure we are making a difference for those people living with eating disorders, their families and carers. And that to me is a real difference, and one of the reasons I joined Butterfly. You can really see how the work that we will all do together will ultimately make a significant difference to those living with eating disorders in Australia. So one of the projects that I worked on with my team back at an old employer was working with a small not-for-profit organisation in Australia called Australian Doctors International. They were putting volunteer doctors up into Papua New Guinea, into the Western Province and the New Ireland province of Papua New Guinea. Now, New Ireland is a small slither of land with about 120,000 people, sort of just north of Bougainville and sort of just across from the Rabaul volcano. And they have only 1 or 2 doctors available to the entire population. Now, the challenge for Australian Doctors International was they didn't have access to very good pathology information and diagnostic information. That was making it hard for them to do their job. So we partnered with Australian Doctors International to put some of our own people on the ground in the New Ireland province and help train some of the locals in terms of better diagnostic testing, thereby enabling the work of the Australian doctors who are volunteering there. It was tremendously rewarding. It's a beautiful place, Papua New Guinea, up until the point you get ill. The reality is it has some of the highest rates of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria anywhere in the world, and yet it's only a very short boat ride from the northern shores of Australia. And what was fantastic about that project was it was 2 organisations, one commercial, one not-for-profit, working together to ultimately improve the lives of those who were living in a very close neighbour of Australia. So one quote that's always stuck in my mind, and I think it's quite applicable to my new role at Butterfly, is one from Winston Churchill, so obviously a long time ago. And I'm not sure about the exact wording, but it goes something like this. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. But courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And I think, from a Butterfly Foundation perspective, we know our role is to represent the voice of those living with eating disorders in Australia, their carers and their families. But we also have a responsibility to work collaboratively with all parts of the eating disorders landscape. So in order to do that, we need to sit and we need to listen and seek to understand others' perspectives, because only then will we truly get the right thing happening for those living with eating disorders in Australia, their families and their carers. My initial focus at Butterfly is really to listen to the voices of many people in this landscape, whether they be people with lived experience, their families or carers, clinicians working in the space or other organisations. And as I meet with these individuals and groups, I'm really asking all of them one key question, which is, if there was one thing you could change in the eating disorders area or landscape within Australia, what would you change? So I'd really love to hear from all of you in terms of what would you change in this area to make life better for those living with eating disorders, their families and their carers. So maybe you could post that back to me, and I'd love to see what you were thinking.